Welcome to another deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're plunging into a book from 1798, one that really fundamentally changed English poetry, Lyrical Ballads, with a few other poems.
That original edition, yeah. Groundbreaking stuff.
Our source is the full text of that first edition. And our mission, well, we want to understand the unique vision behind it, explore some of the, surprising and moving human stories inside, and really uncover why it felt so revolutionary back then. What were they trying to do? And importantly, what insights does this 200-year-old book still hold for you today?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, it's fascinating because they kind of knew they'd face resistance. Right at the start, there's this thing called an advertisement.
An advertisement, like for soap.
No, not quite. It's less like an ad, more like a mission statement, or maybe even a defense, preemptively.
Okay, like a manifesto.
Yeah.
So they knew people would be surprised, maybe even a bit confused.
Definitely. They call the poems experiments right out of the gate.
Experiments. Okay, what kind of experiment were they running exactly?
The core idea was really about language, and subject matter too, I guess. They wanted, and I'm quoting here, to ascertain how far the language of conversation in the middle and lower classes of society is adapted to the purposes of poetic pleasure.
Wow. Okay, so using the way real, ordinary people talked back then for poetry. That sounds...
Radical, yeah. For the time, poetry often meant formal, elevated language, grand themes, gods and kings.
Right, so they were deliberately turning away from, what do they call it, gaudiness and inane phraseology.
Exactly, turning towards everyday speech, the language of farmers, shepherds, the poor.
That must have felt incredibly fresh. Maybe even jarring for readers used to, something completely different.
Oh, absolutely. They predicted readers would find these poems strange and awkward. That's A-U-K-W-A-R-D, the old spelling.
Strange and awkward. And they thought people might even question if it was really poetry at all.
Precisely. They knew they were poking the bear, challenging the established norms.
And their defense, their response to that, it's pretty telling, isn't it?
It is. They essentially say, look, don't get bogged down by the word poetry. Instead, ask yourself this. Do the poems have a natural delineation of human passions, human characters, and human incidents?
Basically, does it feel real? Does it capture something true about being human?
Yes. If it does that, then the reader should just, quote, consent to be pleased. Let yourself enjoy it.
I like that. It's a shift in focus, away from just the fancy style.
Towards emotional truth. Psychological reality. Judge it by whether it depicts genuine human experience, not if it ticks all the traditional poetic boxes.
They even anticipate the highbrow critics, right? The ones with superior judgment who might find the style too familiar, lacking dignity.
They address that head on. And they hint that maybe, just maybe, readers familiar with older writers or those skilled at portraying manners and passions might actually complain less.
It's almost like saying, if you really know literature, you'll get what we're doing.
Kind of. And they even pull in a quote from Sir Joshua Reynolds to back this up, arguing that good taste in poetry isn't just automatic, it's an acquired talent.
Acquired through severe thought and a long continued intercourse with the best models. So don't just have a knee-jerk reaction.
Exactly. They're suggesting quick, superficial judgments might miss the point entirely. You need to engage with it.
The advertisement also gives these little hints about specific poems, which is fascinating. Like mentioning Goody Blake and Harry Gill is based on a well-authenticated fact.
Right, that grounds it. It supports their aim of showing real human incidents, even if the story itself feels, a bit spooky.
And the note about the thorn, that it's told by loquacious narrator, not the author themselves.
Yeah, that immediately sets you up. You know you're getting the story through a specific filter, maybe a gossipy one. It shows they're playing with perspective, with voice, using the narrator as part of the experiment.
And then there's the rhyme of the ancient mariner. They say it imitates the style and spirit of the elder poets.
But crucially, using language they thought was understandable for the last 3 centuries.
So, looking back, but keeping it accessible, a blend of old and new.
Trying to capture that ancient feel, that mystery, without just using deliberately obscure words that would, turn readers off.
And finally, they link expostulation and reply, and the tables turned directly to a chat they had with a friend who was maybe a bit too into modern books of moral philosophy.
Yeah. It tells you these poems are jumping right into contemporary debates about knowledge. How do we learn? How do we find wisdom? And spoiler alert, they're leaning towards intuition towards nature over just dry reason.
Okay, so that's the blueprint, the challenge they threw down.
Mm.
Now, let's see how the poems themselves actually, deliver on this. We've got quite a mix here.
We really do. From these huge supernatural tales to very quiet, intimate looks at rural life.
And you almost have to start with the big one, right? The one that just leaps out.
The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, absolutely.
Mm.
It's long, it's wild, it feels quite different from many of the others. A proper ballad, but supernaturally charged. They even give you an argument, a little summary up front.
Yeah, it grabs you straight away. This old sailor, he stops a guy on his way to a wedding.
Compels him, yeah. Has to tell a story.
And the story starts. Ship sailing south, gets trapped in ice. Then the albatross shows up.
And at first it's seen as this great omen, right? Hailed, as it were, a Christian soul. It seems to help them. The ice splits, a good wind picks up.
But then the mariner just shoots it with his crossbow. It feels so random, so senseless, like an act of violence against grace almost.
And boom, the consequences hit. Hard. The wind dies. The ship is just stuck. As idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Incredible line.
And the thirst. Oh, God, the thirst. Water. Water everywhere. Need any drop to drink. You can feel it.
Then the sea turns nightmarish. Slimy things, weird lights, death fires danced, the water burning green and blue and white. They figure out a spirit, the spirit from the albatross's home, the land of mist and snow is after them.
And the crew, they blame the mariner. They hang the dead bird around his neck, like a physical mark of his guilt.
A heavy burden, yeah. Then the ghost ship appears, just skeletal.
With two figures on board, playing dice, death, and life and death. Chilling.
And life and death wins the mariner, which is almost worse than death, isn't it? This state of being alive but cursed.
And the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
They pay the price first. 4 times 50 living men. 200 men. They just drop dead, one by one.
He sees their souls whizzing past him like the whiz of his crossbow, tying it right back to his crime.
He's left completely alone. Surrounded by corpses, cursed by their staring eyes. He can't even pray. Just total isolation, spiritual and physical.
The turning point, though, it comes when he's at his lowest. He sees these water snakes in the moonlight.
And they're described so vividly. Blue, glossy green, and velvet black.
And something shifts in him. He sees their beauty, feels the sudden spring of love, and he blesses them. Almost without thinking, unaware.
That subconscious act of appreciating life, loving something beyond himself.
Breaks the curse. He can pray. The albatross falls off his neck, sinks like lead. He sleeps. It rains.
But it's not over, is it? The weirdness continues. The dead men get up.
Yeah, but they're reanimated by angelic spirits, not their own souls. They start working the ship. There are these strange, sweet sounds coming from the bodies.
Like instruments, an angel song. Then the ship starts moving, powered by that spirit that was pursuing him.
He overhears voices talking about his penance. It's not over yet. Penance done, and penance more will do. The ship races home supernaturally fast.
He gets back to his own country. The curse lifts from the dead men's eyes. These seraph men, these angelic beings, stand over the bodies. Then a small boat approaches.
With a pilot, the pilot's son, and a hermit, a holy man.
And just as they get there, the mariner's ship just sinks, gone like lead.
He's pulled into their boat, but the sight of him, or maybe the whole event, just shatters them. The pilot shrieks, the boy goes crazy, says, "The devil knows how to row."
Only the hermit stays calm, asks him what kind of man he is. And that's when the mariner feels this agony.
This compulsion to tell his tale. He realizes that's his ongoing penance. He has to wander the earth, find specific people, and share his story.
And the lesson he gives the wedding guests, the core message from all that suffering.
It's simple but profound. He prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. He prayeth best who loveth best all things both great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all.
Love and respect for all of creation. That's the path to connection with God, with the divine. It's a powerful message wrapped in this wild Gothic package.
Absolutely. And the wedding guest. He misses the party but leaves a sadder and a wiser man. The story changed him.
What a journey that poem is. But moving away from the epic and supernatural, we find lots of poems that seem much more aligned with that initial goal in the advertisement, the focus on, ordinary people and their lives.
Exactly. The poems rooted in rural life, often showing hardship, or maybe just capturing unusual characters. Goody Blake and Harry Gill is a perfect example, presented almost like a folk tale based on that well-authenticated fact.
It feels stark, doesn't it? Goody Blake, she's desperately poor, freezing cold. Harry Gill, he's this lusty drover, well-off strong.
And she's caught stealing wood just to keep warm. Her desperate prayer, or curse, seems to have this immediate physical effect on Harry.
He ends up cursed with perpetual cold. Teeth chattering, wasting away, always muttering, "Poor Harry Gill is very cold."
It uses really simple language to show this raw conflict, poverty, desperation, and then this harsh consequence. It makes you think about need versus property and maybe a kind of rough, almost supernatural justice.
Then there's the female vagrant. That one's much longer, a whole life story of suffering.
It really traces how someone can be crushed by, well, society and bad luck. Starts peacefully, her family has land by a lake, but then a rich landowner takes it away, destroys their livelihood.
They're forced out, become poor. She gets married, has kids, but then disaster strikes repeatedly. Sickness, fever from polluted air incurred. Then war and plague kill her husband and children after they're transported overseas.
She eventually gets back to England, but she's completely alone, homeless, starving, finds a bit of kindness from other vagrants, but she can't bring herself to live by stealing like them.
And her deepest pain isn't just the hardship, it's what it did to her inner self.
It's such a powerful, unflinching look at how things like enclosure, war, disease, just the lack of any safety net can destroy a life. It gives a voice, a real dignity to someone society would just dismiss as a beggar.
Simon Lee, the old huntsman, hits differently. It's more about aging, losing your strength.
Yeah, the contrast is key. He used to be this incredibly vibes huntsman, full of life and energy. Now he's old, weak, struggling just to chop a tree root on his tiny bit of land.
And the narrator helps him, chops the root easily. Simon's reaction. It's overwhelming gratitude. Tears.
It's incredibly moving. It shows that quiet desperation of losing your physical independence and how a small kindness can feel enormous in that situation. The poem ends with this reflection on gratitude, how witnessing it can be almost heartbreaking.
Then the idiot boy. That focuses on maternal love, but also anxiety, right?
Absolutely. Betty Foy sends her son Johnny, and yes, they use the term idiot, which was the language of the time, describing developmental difference on this errand to get a doctor for a sick neighbor.
And the poem captures Johnny's simple happiness on the pony, making his little burr-burr sound.
But the tension builds when he doesn't come back. Betty's worry grows frantic. She searches for him, even encounters the doctor who's completely unsympathetic. She gets so desperate she thinks about drowning herself.
The relief when she finds him safe by the waterfall is just immense. You feel her joy.
It's a beautiful portrayal of that fierce maternal bond. And Johnny's answer about where he's been. The cocks did crow to who, and the sun did shine so cold. It's cryptic, poetic in its own way. It reminds you he experiences the world differently.
The thorn is another fascinating one. It feels like it's all about place and rumor and maybe unreliable narration.
Definitely. The narrator is obsessed with this specific spot. An old thorn tree, a muddy little pond, this heap of moss. He describes it in minute detail, like he's trying to unlock its secret.
And the secret is tied to Martha Ray. Betrayed, went mad, maybe killed her baby there. The rumors are gothic, the moss being red, seeing a baby's reflection.
But the narrator is careful. He relays the gossip, but insists the only thing he knows for sure is that Martha sits there, wearing her scarlet cloak, crying out, "Oh, misery, oh, misery."
So it's less about solving the mystery.
And more about how tragedy gets embedded in a landscape, how stories get woven from bits of gossip and observation. It captures that human incident, but through the lens of community storytelling and enduring sorrow.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, we also have poems that really dig into that relationship between the human mind and nature, the stuff we now call romantic, with a capital R.
Exactly. This emerging sensibility that valued emotion, individual experience, and saw nature as, well, more than just pretty scenery, as a source of feeling, wisdom, maybe even spiritual connection.
Lines written in early spring feels like a pure expression of that. Sitting in a grove, feeling the joy of nature.
Hearing the birds, seeing the flowers, and believing they feel pleasure too. But that feeling leads to sadness. Much it grieved my heart to think what man has made of man.
The harmony he feels in nature just highlights the conflict and suffering in the human world.
It's simple but powerful.
In that pair of poems, expostulation and reply and the tables turned, they stage a whole debate about this, don't they?
They really do. First, you have Matthew saying, "Why are you just sitting there? Read books. That's where knowledge is." He represents that traditional book learning approach.
But William, the speaker in reply, argues he's learning just by being quiet, observing, letting nature work on him, gaining wisdom through feeling, through harmony.
And then the tables turned, pushes back even harder. Get up! Leave your books, go outside.
Let nature be your teacher, that famous line. It argues that raw experience, one impulse from a vernal wood, can teach you more about humanity and morality.
Than all the sages can. It's a direct critique of purely analytical thinking, the meddling intellect that murders to dissect. Instead, it calls for a receptive heart, one that watches and receives.
That's a core statement of their philosophy, really. Feeling and observation over dry intellect.
And lines written a few miles above Tintern Abbey. That's maybe the deepest dive into this connection with nature, looking at how it changes over time.
Right, he's revisiting this place, the Wye Valley, after 5 years. And he reflects on how just the memory of it has sustained him while living in the city, brought him peace, tranquil restoration, even made him a kinder person.
And importantly, his way of seeing nature has evolved. It's not just the immediate youthful excitement anymore. It's deepened into sensing this underlying presence, a spirit that connects everything, including the still sad music of humanity.
He sees his past self in his sister, who's with him and experiencing it fresh. It becomes about shared experience, memory, and this profound evolving bond between the mind and the natural world.
It's a landmark poem for that reason.
The nightingale is interesting too because it takes on a common poetic idea of the sad nightingale and says, nope, you've got it wrong.
Exactly. It argues the bird isn't inherently melancholy. People just project their own sadness onto its song. If you actually listen, really listen with an open heart, its song is full of joy, full of love.
It's a call for authentic experience over received ideas or poetic cliches. Go listen for yourself.
And then lines left upon a seat in a yew tree uses nature almost as a symbol for a wasted life.
Yeah, the bleakness around the yew tree mirrors the man's unfruitful life. He had potential, lofty views, but pride and isolation ruined him.
He'd look out at the beautiful view from his seat, and it became a painful reminder of the connection to the world he'd lost. The poem uses the place to warn the reader against that kind of proud withdrawal.
And beyond these, the collection has so many other pieces reinforcing these themes, often shorter, focusing on those overlooked lives.
Absolutely. Things like The Foster Mother's Tale, which is a fragment about madness and escape. The Dungeon, a powerful critique of prisons, suggesting nature could heal better.
The Mad Mother, capturing that raw maternal grief and love. Old Man Traveling, just a brief, poignant sketch.
The Complaint of a Forsaken Indian Woman, giving voice to someone abandoned. The Convict, showing sympathy for someone outside the law. They really did commit to exploring a wider range of human experience.
Which brings us back full circle to their initial aims in that advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
So, thinking about it all, how well did they actually achieve that goal, using the language of common people for poetic pleasure? And what was it that made that so challenging back then?
Well, I think they largely succeeded. They showed it could be done. That powerful, moving poetry didn't need fancy language or epic subjects. It could use simpler words, focus on relatable feelings, everyday struggles. But that directness, that simplicity was the challenge.
Because people expected something else.
Exactly. They expected poetic diction, elevated themes, poems about poor old women or kids described as idiots, written in a relatively plain verse. That felt, well, undignified to some, maybe even crude. It forced a rethink of what poetry could even be.
And we've seen this strong connection between the mind and nature running through so many poems. How are they really exploring that link?
They're showing nature as more than just a backdrop. It's an active participant in our emotional lives. It offers comfort, it teaches lessons, it can feel almost like a spiritual entity. But it's a two-way street. Our mood affects how we see nature, and nature affects our mood, our thoughts, our very being. It's this dynamic interplay.
And this constant focus on the ordinary, the marginalized Goody Blake, the vagrant, Simon Lee, Johnny, the Forsaken Woman. Why was championing these lives so revolutionary?
Because it asserted their importance. It said their lives, their feelings, their stories mattered just as much as those of kings or heroes. It shifted the focus of serious literature, demanding empathy for people usually ignored or dismissed. It broadened poetry's scope dramatically.
So bringing it to today, what insights do these couple of centuries-old experiments in lyrical ballads still offer us about storytelling, empathy, nature, how we see things?
I think they offer a huge insight. A reminder, maybe, that profound stories and deep truths aren't just found in grand events or complex language. They're right here in the everyday, in the lives of people we might overlook. in our own connection or lack of connection to the natural world.
So they encourage us to look closer.
Definitely. To look closer, to listen more carefully, to cultivate empathy, to value insights gained not just from analysis or books, but from direct feeling, from observation, from, being present in the world. They're really an invitation to find the extraordinary in what seems ordinary.
We've certainly journeyed through a varied landscape today. Poverty, suffering, the supernatural, deep thoughts about nature.